Now let's give a virtual drum roll to our panelists. The panelists for today's session are Andrew Mendenhall, VP of Product Development from the Catalyst Product Development Group, Colin Bayard, Idea and Concept Innovation Lead at the Delta Faucet Company, and Larry Holmes, Industrial Product Designer at Safe Homes. Now let's welcome our first guest, Andrew Mendenhall.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity here to be with everyone and share a little bit about my background and my knowledge. My name is Andrew Mendenhall. I graduated from Purdue University in 1997 with a degree in industrial design. A little bit of backstory for me. I grew up with strong interest in creative arts and also kind of an equal interest in math and sciences. So in my senior year of school, I was into sculpture, drawing, also technical arts as far as drafting and things like that. But equally, I wanted to pursue maybe an engineering type career. I just couldn't decide exactly where to go. And I started with a really great scholarship at Indiana University. But all they had for me was sculpture. So that was going to be my path forward with sculpture. And in my freshman year, I took that "What do you want to do with your life" class and learned about industrial design. A lot of people don't know what industrial design is. I mean, it's not industrial engineering. Even our designers' families usually don't know what it is after 20 years. It's not mechanical engineering. It's this really cool blend of the creative arts and mechanical arts. So as an industrial designer, we're trained to illustrate ideas, use design thinking tools, things like that, to help people visualize ideas and take things into production. Almost every part or product that you interact with in your daily life has been touched by an industrial designer or mechanical engineer at some point. It's required for that thing to even exist. So that's kind of a fun little background and what got me into design. Personally, I think the wild fun stuff about me, I live on a little farm. We have 60 different heads of animals, goats, sheep, chickens. So that keeps me hopefully a little bit interesting. Here at Catalyst, my role started as industrial design. I was one of the original employees when we started 22 years ago, and I actually worked with a couple of the owners before. We started the company with this idea of being able to have as much under one roof as possible. And I encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to just look at the website. I'm not going to give you the pitch on that, but check us out and see what we do. We have a lot here at Catalyst. Over the years, I've been able to grow into this role as VP of Product Development. Here at Catalyst now, I kind of mentor our customers through the process. I do get to participate in brainstorming sessions, moderating brainstorming sessions, doing concept generation and things like that. And here in just a minute, I'm going to show a slide deck that shows some of the tools and techniques that we use in industrial design, so you get a little bit of an idea on what makes me happy and what I get to do. Since then, here at Catalyst, I've had the benefit of working on a lot of different product categories, everything from juvenile products to construction equipment and things like that. I think they said my name's on 55 patents or something of that nature. So I enjoy helping people generate intellectual property. The Catalyst ecosystem, here we have everything from design, research, prototyping to injection molding and actual production of plastic parts. So I live in this ecosystem at Catalyst in the front end of the development process. I will oversee a project. When you come to Catalyst, I'll work with you as far as developing a project plan, writing a proposal, mentoring you through that process, guiding you through prototyping and things. The ecosystem I live in is product development. So that's everything from consumer research up through the point of a 3D database that's ready to go for production. And that might be here at Catalyst, it might be domestically, it might be overseas, all of the sort. There is an ecosystem beyond Catalyst, though, that I like to tell, especially entrepreneurs, about whenever they come see us. You're facing a big task, investing in your idea. There's a lot of cost to doing that. So I want people to understand that there's a portion that Catalyst can help with, but there's a portion beyond what Catalyst can do. And I'm excited to hear from our other panelists today, Colin, Larry, and Nick. They've experienced a lot of those different things beyond, building a business, pitching your idea to companies and things, developing a marketing plan. So I'm really personally excited about today's conversations. Why I love what I do, as I told you, I grew up with this interest in art. I get to draw for a living now. People might chuckle at, hey, I grew up and I get to play with markers. We do still use markers. Now we use digital sketching tablets and things like that. So it's really fun. But I really enjoy being able to help people visualize their ideas, the things that they're dreaming about, that they want to see come to life. And then also, I've had the opportunity to go to different manufacturing plants and learn about materials and processes and what it takes to make something become real. So I like to be able to share that knowledge, and that's a really exciting thing about where I'm at in my career right now. So now I'm going to go ahead and take you into a PowerPoint and let you see a little bit of the process, some steps that we use in our We had a customer, Ashland Beveling, come to us a few years ago, and they had a need to develop some face protection for their oil change service bureaus. Their mechanics would sometimes have situations where they would have accidents happen, and they needed some protection. The gentleman that we worked with, is it sharing? The gentleman that we worked with had made several prototypes and wanted to test these out, but he had a difficult time with adoption from his employees. So they asked us to do our thing as industrial designers, and that starts with research. We generate a lot of slides as far as stimulation on what's competitive product look like, what's inspiring in the market, what's some technology that people might be able to use. So we'll take them through this research step. We'll also go out into the field and interview people that are using the product to make sure we understand their unmet needs and what kind of problems that they're having that are meaningful for us to solve, and learn, for instance, here, why don't you want to wear the mock-ups that they've been provided? Then this is the fun stuff. This is where we get to start sketching ideas. We generate as many ideas as we can in brainstorming level, where these are quick and loose drawings, but they show a diverse solution, diverse way of solving the problems, right? So we'll share a lot of those. We'll refine those concepts and tighten up on, maybe the aesthetics that somebody likes or the functional details that our customer likes, and narrow down scope, get a little bit more detail in those drawings, start to add a little color so they can see what they become. You can see in this particular one, they locked in on this idea of this really gnarly web design. It's inspired from one of the original pictures of paintball masks. Again, their goal was that we design something that the people will want to wear to provide this protection for them. As we proceed through the process, we'll take you into 3D CAD models. Our designers will capture that concept in 3D space, and then we can provide photo renderings that might be used for presentations and things of that nature. Our engineers will take that database and work through the manufacturing details and the functional attributes of it. This is an example of what the engineers might do. And they'll go through and they'll develop, maybe a simulation to test forces and things there on it. And ultimately, at the end of it here at Catalyst, we have the ability to build the injection mold tool, and we'll be able to manufacture parts. They still order these from us today. We have an order for these, and they've been deployed at a lot of their oil change facilities all around the country. So it's very exciting, this one, to show that example. Now, for a little fun show and tell, we're going to share with you a little bit about 2020 and what that meant for Catalyst. We all lived through that, and the need for PPE. That was a struggle for everyone. And at the time, there was a shortage of PPE. There was difficulty getting product from China. For instance, safety goggles. I'll show you some examples of that here. We started a project here last year to develop safety goggles. We couldn't get these in. So we used a slightly different process. It was a very abbreviated process. We knew what we needed to make, but there's a difficulty with safety goggles. They're very difficult to assemble the lens in there. And that's why a lot of things are made in China instead of here domestically. So we had to address how we resolve the assembly detail. And these are some examples of 3D prints that we did during the process to kind of test the fit and things. Very exciting to me personally. I love 3D printing and all the technology in it. It's been a long time waiting to get material that you could really bend and flex. So we tested that. Here's the next generation of that prototype as we worked through some changes in engineering details. We worked through how to resolve this lens. We actually came up with a design where we could injection mold the lens, put that into the tool, and overmold all the soft material around it. Catalyst did that last summer, and we produced 30,000 safety goggles. Over here next, you'll see this is the injection mold tool that made that soft material. Here's an example of the safety goggles. So we first mold the lens, then we insert the lens into the tool, and we injection mold the entire soft frame around that. And then later we'll assemble the vents We actually also made, I'll show you these straps. There was a shortage in elastic. Everything was difficult to get last year. So to solve the elastic problem, we actually injection molded our own straps, and then those get assembled into it. So very exciting, quick project in a couple months, start to finish. We sketched ideas, we developed the CAD model, we built the tool, we manufactured and assembled 30,000 safety goggles for the state of Indiana. So we're happy to be able to do our part and contribute last year. That's a little bit about some of the tools you'll see in the background. There's a lot of different projects that we've had here, sketches and things like that on the process. A lot of tools in-house that we have to help you along. But as I mentioned, there's more to your story. There's more that you'll experience to get your product idea to market. And I look forward to hearing Colin share with you his portion, and Larry and Nick, all that they've lived through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing your story. Folks, this is a company that's explaining how they're going through the problem of a crisis, which we've all gone through with COVID. And they've given you a framework. Andrew, what you talked about is really a useful framework of design thinking and looking at product solutions by problematizing issues that individuals or users have, generating as many ideas as possible and coming up with a diverse set of ideas and solutions. Also mirrors state-of-the-art research and effectuation, where you don't really focus on a particular outcome, but rather you focus on the range of resources that you have and the diverse alternatives that you can produce with the resources at hand. So fantastic story of Catalyst and your product ideation phase and talking to customers. Next, we're going to build on these ideas. And our next guest is Colin Bayard. In his role at Delta Faucet, Colin focuses on using consumer-centric innovation practices to generate early-stage ideas, test them with consumers, and socialize ideas across the company. With a passion for equitable, human-centered design, consumer insights, and trend research, Colin enjoys challenging organizations to innovate with a bias towards inclusion. Everyone, please welcome Colin.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Really just an honor to be here. Thank you to IBE for inviting me. Excited to share just a little bit about what I've called lessons earned here, because I think that a common thread you'll probably see, and Larry and Andrew and I were actually even just talking about this before the call started, is once you want to get into the innovation space, it's very difficult. It's very challenging. You'll face lots of failure. So we often talk about lessons learned, but I really want to focus on we've earned these kinds of things, and you'll have lessons in your own journey as well. Just a little bit of my background is I'm a two-time graduate of Indiana University. Both my bachelor's and my master's is from IU in Bloomington. And before joining Delta Faucet Company, I was working with a group called the University Innovation Alliance, which was focusing on improving student success outcomes for first-generation students, students who are on Pell Grants attending their institutions, and students of color. And I had the absolute privilege to work with 11 of our nation's most innovative institutions, from the University of Central Florida in Orlando, Florida, all the way out to Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon. It was a really awesome opportunity. We worked on a number of innovation-related projects, really targeting not products per se, but student services. How can we really improve the way that universities engage with students, understanding that universities weren't particularly designed with especially first-generation students and students of color in mind, and are often can be toxic environments for those students. And they don't progress through their education, and they don't graduate, and they don't obtain jobs at the same rates as the students who benefit from the design of those educational systems. And so I learned a lot through this process. And my main kind of project there was working on student career services, which was this really unique problem that I couldn't really get people to, at least initially, understand why it was so problematic, that our system wasn't designed around the needs of specific individuals. So in my bio, Nick talked about that lens towards inclusion, I think is really critical, because oftentimes when we design solutions for everybody, we actually end up designing solutions that marginalize different individuals in the marketplace. And a great example of that is hopefully everyone's experienced this phenomenon. This is one of my favorite phenomenons, the pull-push door or the push-pull door, which you'll see sometimes too. And this really drove how I thought about this problem of student career readiness. Like, we are trying to put labels on things, but really they're just not functionally working the way that they're supposed to, right? And so this is Don Norman, who wrote a great book called The Design of Everyday Objects, who has this really funny saying. It's like, why do doors need instruction manuals, right? Why does that push or pull door need to say push or pull? There are ways to make that operationally obvious. And this really drives my mindset around innovation. I think far too often we do, as companies, as businesses, as entrepreneurs, as intrapreneurs, whatever you want to define yourself as, of figuring out what's expedient or what makes sense for us. And the problem with that is what's expedient or what's simple or what's easy for us to do as the provider of a product, business, or service is not what's easiest for the person on the receiving end of that. And so, Nick, thank you so much for the easy transition here. And so I learned and practice using design thinking on a regular basis. I went to the Stanford Hassel-Plattner Institute of Design a number of years ago for our training on this, and have been trained by various world-class consultancies in human-centered design to put this not just as a theory, but put this into practice in my day-to-day work. And so really, this is how I think about driving product solutions and service solutions. I've done this now both at Delta, targeting obviously faucets and fixtures, but also in university settings, targeting service opportunities to really improve satisfaction and outcomes for college students. And similar to what Andrew was just sharing a little bit before, the first step in this, and I think the real key to any kind of meaningful innovation practice, is a deep understanding of the problem that you're really trying to solve. So you start with this stage of really going out and talking to consumers or customers or whoever it is that you're targeting for your business, not to seek approval for the ideas that you have, but just a deep understanding of how people experience similar products and services today and what the gaps and pain points are that you might look to fix and solve. You'll then actually try to reframe the problem using those insights. And then, similar to what Andrew had to share earlier, come up with dozens of ideas. I think, we talk about brainstorming. For me, ideation and brainstorming are very similar, but ideation, I'm a firm believer that everybody can be creative. It just so happens that oftentimes we put people in a place where we ask them to generate something from nothing. But real creativity, in my opinion, is using your experiences and your perspective to be able to effectively create new and interesting combinations of thoughts. And so ideation for me is really about asking really good questions so that people with diverse perspectives and opinions can clash with other people with diverse perspectives and opinions to come up with something new. And then the real key here is whether it's a service or a product. Andrew talked about drawing out and refining some of these prototypes. You can build prototypes for products and for services. For a service, for instance, you might actually create a kind of skit. And when you go out into the world to test that with consumers, you're testing out this new service model by putting the consumer in the role of consumer and walking them through your skit to better understand what's happening there. But as promised, I said I was going to give you some lessons earned. I have many more than this, and all of these have been learned, to be quite honest, through my failure to practice these initially and having to experience what happens when the opposite of these is true. So these are really based in my experience practicing innovation, and so their mileage will vary accordingly. My first key lesson here really is have more dedication to the problem you're trying to solve than an idea. Ideas are really a dime a dozen. Anyone can have an idea, and there are so many different possible solutions to any given problem. I think what creates sustainable change and can help carry you through the difficult times of experiencing failure is to understand that if you're setting out to solve an intractable problem, you have a clear idea of what that problem is and a passion for it, then when an idea fails, you don't feel like a failure. You're able to just remove that idea and then go back to the drawing board to try and fix the problem. And so this was really key for me in my last project with the University Innovation Alliance, where we tested so many different things. And for reasons either from a systems thinking lens, from a student desirability lens, so many different ways to evaluate ideas, we struggled to find solutions. We were eventually able to get to a really good place, but it's because we had such a crystal clear focus on what the problem we were trying to solve was, and we knew exactly who we were trying to solve it for, that as we faced those roadblocks and as those failures, it didn't feel as much like a failure. We knew that we were just trying solutions to a difficult problem. My second key lesson earned here is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so whether you're starting a new business on your own, you're in a business now, maybe you are a mid-level or senior level leader at a small or medium-sized company, whatever state that you are in your career, I think this is a really key understanding that yes, an idea is great and a strategy on how to execute it is great, but if you don't have the culture to enable true innovative practices, you're going to run into impossible roadblocks to overcome. And so some things that really enable an innovative culture, things like celebrating failure, not just allowing it to be okay, but actually celebrating it. One of my favorite examples of this is at Google. They have this like exploration, innovation, venture lab called Google X. And when the Google X groups go out and investigate these really big problems with wild solutions, when they find out that maybe that there's no promise in that problem or no promise that in that solution, they'll break the team apart, they'll call that a failure, but then that team will actually get a bonus. They might even get some additional time off. They might actually even get a couple months to explore to find a new thing. They actually reward that failure because your idea isn't going to necessarily be the silver bullet on the first occasion. And we have to create culture that allows for the success of future ideas and the motivation to continue to push through. I think another key culture thing that I think that a lot of organizations really miss here is really allowing the innovation to happen outside of more traditional metrics of success. You can say that you want innovative solutions, but if your metric is proven revenue or you need immediate growth or short-term growth, this is like you're not actually enabling true innovation to happen. So you need to make sure that your incentives and that your metrics and how you're measuring success are aligned to that innovation vision, or else you're saying that you value innovation. However, the strategies that you're deploying aren't allowing you or your employees to succeed. So I think that's really important. My third one is, and this is huge, right? So I do a lot of early stage innovation. And for me, one of the best ways to keep costs down when you're looking at growth or innovation opportunities is to do gritty, cheap experiments. Go to somewhere where there's people, take a drawing, a prototype, a sketch, anything that you have, and walk real people through that to test hypotheses. We just did this recently at Delta. I led a session. We mocked up, this was for service opportunities within Delta. I mocked up some different prototypes and we actually took them to consumers and we're like, hey, use this. And this is a thing that we're exploring. Could be real, could not be real, but play with this, right? And not selling it to the consumer, but actually trying to test your hypotheses, right? Trying to test out, do consumers want a service that looks more like A than B? And I think that's a really key thing to do. And you can do that for borderline free if you really want to, and you can find the right place. And then finally, use the correct methods and tools. This is something I see all the time causing problems in organizations. If you have ideas, but they're not being enabled, you might actually need change management instead of design thinking. If you're trying to do incremental innovation and you're trying to make small improvements, maybe what you need to do is look into process mapping or Lean Six Sigma instead of doing a full new design process and trying to create new solutions. Having that real dedication to the problem can help you figure that out. Because if you use the wrong methods, you might end up with an answer, but you're going to end up with a lot of resource waste and inefficiency trying to get to the answer. I think far too often people see, especially things like design thinking, as this like shiny object in the distance, and they think that's what they need to do. And oftentimes it's not. And I think that a lot of groups end up in trouble through doing that. So these are a few lessons that I've earned and learned throughout my time engaging in innovation, and I look forward to engaging in Q&A with everyone after.
Thank you, Colin, for sharing your story. And just as a reminder, we have a thoughtful group of entrepreneurs and innovators here, so please type in your questions in the Q&A box. There are a couple elements that really stood out here. You hit on this idea of being dedicated to your problem more than your solution, which is fantastic. That we don't need to fall in love with our ideas. And you also mentioned this idea of culture eats strategy, which is super fascinating, that it's really how you cultivate this entrepreneurial mindset that allows you to bridge gaps, solve problems, and create meaningful and useful products. And this idea also of a proof of concept. We all have hypotheses about the world, and entrepreneurs definitely have these hypotheses that they want to validate and test. But the proof of concept is, do it quickly, do it as cheap as possible. And if you begin to summarize all these ideas together, what I think Andrew and Colin have really hit on is the idea that entrepreneurs, innovators, these thought leaders, they're not a homogenous group that are distinctly different from everyone else, but rather there's a lot of heterogeneity between these individuals, and it's really your ability to cognitively and shift your mind and be flexible and be adaptive and be opportunistic that allows you to really create meaningful products in the venture space. And this really goes, it's a great segue to our next presenter, who's Larry Holmes. He's the industrial product designer at Safe Homes. Larry is going to share his story of how his son's near tragedy started him on this innovation path and where he is today. So Larry, it's all yours.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. Thank you. The guys gave me a great segue, both Andrew and Colin. You guys, you're helping to fill in the blanks that I wanted to. To all the viewers out there, I am jealous of you and I'm excited for you. I literally wish that I would have had an opportunity like this when I was initially starting my thing. I'm going to jump back and forth with this conversation, so bear with me. But as I continue to grow and develop with Safe Homes, a lot of people would ask me, hey, how are you getting the funding and how are you doing this? Well, being a part of a group like the SBA is how you do it, even right now, because the SBA may not necessarily give you the funds, but they gave me the resources to network with people who did become those resources. So anyway, I implore you to stay in touch with the SBA, continue to follow the group, and in advance, I wish you all blessings for your journey. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm going to go into a little bit about me. I'm going to tell you about my journey. I'm going to tell you how I started Safe Homes and go from there. I grew up in Pontiac, Michigan, a small city outside of Metro Detroit. I was a very weird kid in the sense that I thought differently from my peers, whereas most people were going to Toys R Us, I was going to Sears. I was the kid that I liked lawnmowers and weed whackers and VCRs and TVs. I'm looking at these things and my mind is going, how does this work? How did they get people inside of a radio to make music? I'm being silly, but you get my point. I needed to understand things. I needed to comprehend things. I've always been artistic. I was always drawing on walls, tissue sketches all over the place. That was just my thing. Everyone would say, hey, what are you going to be? I'm going to be an artist. I thought an artist did everything, and little did I know that as I grew up, an artist doesn't know everything. An artist may have done one facet, but then I understood about a designer is differently from an artist. I personally think I was a hybrid, the best of both worlds. So I eventually ended up going to college, and I ended up going to two major places, major universities. I went to the Center for Creative Studies, as well as I went to Wayne State in Detroit, Michigan. They were a great melting pot for bringing the mechanical and the artistic part together. When I listen to Andrew, literally, we share pretty much the same journey. Being an industrial designer, what I love about being an industrial designer is being an ID or being a product designer. That is not just my occupation; it's literally my DNA. It is endowed me with to be able to do everything from graphics to mechanical to engineering to the aesthetic aspect. Literally, I have worked for places like the automotive industry. I worked for kitchen gadgetry. I've done for juvenile products, and literally, more than likely, the majority of the people out there watching this, you have some of my products in your home right now. I have products currently right now in Bed Bath & Beyond, at Walmart, at Target, and it's pretty fulfilling when I see people picking up my product in the store and knowing that I did it. So with that being said, and I'm going to try not to talk too much, but with that being said, a lot of people would ask me, how did I get this thing started? How did I know when I had a good product? Okay, now that I am where I am, how do I take it to the next level? Well, I'm in a stage right now that I'm doing well. I'm doing well to a point that I could afford to take a trip to Europe, but I'm not where I want to be at. Prior to COVID, my product was received by both Walmart and Bye Bye Baby. Sadly, I'm not in those spots because COVID is basically knocked those opportunities out. I still do keep in touch with the people at Bye Bye Baby. They are still interested, but I'm holding tight because I'm waiting. I'm in the process of releasing revision 2 to my product, but I'll show you revision 1 in just a minute. And sadly, the people at Walmart, they're no longer there, but that's another journey. So with that being said, I'm going to show a presentation that I did present to Walmart, and this will give you an idea, a better idea of things. There, please, where you at? Okay, bear with me. Okay, I hope you guys can see the presentation. I hope I'm doing well. I hope you guys can see this. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward. Right here, this is in meeting with any OEM, they want to know, first of all, hey, do you know who we are? So it's almost like doing maybe an interview with a person. You want to let the OEM know, hey, not only are you going to know me, but I'm letting you know that I know who you are as well. It's saying that you did your research, and at the same time, I think it's kind of flattering. Okay, as it pertains to me, I've shared a little bit. I was the weird kid that liked to draw, liked to sketch, et cetera, et cetera. But this is how I got started. When my son was approximately 3 years old, we had a small little 1,200 square foot plate. I literally stepped maybe 10, 15 feet from his bedroom just to put something in the kitchen. I heard the sound of running water in the background. My son had went to our bathroom, turned on the faucet. As I ran back into our tub, he literally was falling in the tub when I caught him. It was scalding hot water. I caught him by the ankles, picked him up. I'm dusting him off, making sure he's okay. And after this event happened, again, he was about 3 years old. My first thought was, why doesn't somebody make something to prevent this? Well, I had this epiphany that said, hey, you're an industrial designer. Why don't you make something about this? So prior to my my endeavor, of course, I went around looking to see if there's anything that could be on a faucet to prevent child accidents or drownings or scalding from happening, and there was nothing. So this was the catalyst to start Safe Homes. And real fast, if you see this right here, this is literally my product. So, Safe Home. And one of the things that I found very interesting, I was telling Colin about this, is that if you look at it, how my product is, I literally designed my product around Delta hardware. So if you look at it, how it is, go back, bam. you have two collars. These collars fit basically on your faucet handle, and then there's what I call a zip strip. The zip strip is basically a tether. It is the engagement that locks both the handles and prevents the handles from being turned. Back here in the back, there's a little trigger, which is a release trigger, which, of course, releases it. Fast forward it. There's another picture. It slides on. And so let me go back a little bit. The thing about my product, when I dove into this product, or when I dive into any product, I try to look for products, or I try to design things that are multicultural, that cross different ethnic backgrounds, that cross different financial backgrounds. As I mentioned earlier, I have products that are in Walmart, that are in Bye Bye Baby, or I'm not Bye Bye, but are Bed Bath and Beyond, that are in Target. As an industrial designer, I've worked for, again, the automotive industry. I was a senior designer at Otterbox. And so I look for products that span broad horizons. Safe Homes, it became my obsession. Some people would ask me, how do I know when a good product is a good product? One of the things that I would do, as Andrew was talking about, you make tons of sketches. There's tons of mock-ups. And then I would cross-reference and show these things with people that were close to me. For Safe Homes, I would deal with a lot of mothers, asking their opinion. Is this something that you need? Is this something that you would use? I would do mock-ups, and then I was constantly in the home improvement stores trying to test these things to see if they would work. And after so long, when I got that validation that I needed, again, as a product designer, this is my world. This is my culture. I know what goes into going from a tissue sketch to a feasible product. So then I started doing all the CAD development. That's a whole nother story. From the CAD development, I made tons and tons of 3D prototypes. From there, when I found that this was viable, I started going to little neighborhood fairs, and I started selling these things out there, and from there it took off. One of the things, and checking my time, one of the things that I try to, let me go through this real fast just so people can see. These are just reviews when people have bought it. And I'm gonna show you right here. One of the cool things about my product is literally probably 10 to 15% of my customers are pet owners. I didn't realize that cats would get up on the countertop and turn on the water. So I have a lot of pet owners using my product. So let me get out of here. So anyway, I'm going to try and cut this close. One of the things that I would tell entrepreneurs is there's two things. Number one, get used to being uncomfortable. Become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you are going to have a lot of times when you don't know what to do. Where do I get these resources? How do I do this thing? And secondly, don't be afraid of failure, because there's going to be so many closed doors, so many I don't knows, that it's going to be discouraging. Oh, let me say this last thing. In this quick YouTube microwavable generation, a lot of people are expecting that, hey, maybe I'm going to have this viable product within 1 year. I'm going to be a multimillionaire. It's not going to happen. I'm going to coin this from Mark Cuban from Shark Tank. He calls a lot of people entrepreneurs. You would have to discern between, are you an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur? I've literally been doing this product for 15 years. My son is 18 years old now. And I've just now started to see a lot of really success over the last 3 to 4 years. So with that being said, I think I'm going to shut up and wait for Q&A. And Mr. Dr. Nick, I'm going to let you take it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, for sharing your story and telling us about your super creative and innovative product that's really useful. As we begin to synthesize all that we've learned today from Andrew, Colin, and Larry, I think we can tether these ideas around your unique qualification for producing certain products. In this case, in Larry's case, we have an experience, an impactful experience where his child could have been harmed that really spurred his innovation and creativity. But he was uniquely qualified with his industrial background and being the end user of the actual problem and the end user of the product. So that put him in a great position. I think, Larry, you also hit on this idea of being a generalist versus a specialist, that a lot of times in modern days, we really move towards specialization. But, you know, you talked about your broad history, and you had a lot of areas and content areas that encompass the broad scope of knowledge and experiences that you were able to then use for your product ideation process and for your product development. With that all out of the way, I want to thank you all, our presenters, Andrew, Colin, and Larry, for their insights. And we're now going to open up the floor for Q&A. So if you have a question, I implore you to type it in the Q&A box, and we'll get to your question as soon as possible. But I'll go ahead and begin with a question. This is going to be for each one of you. So one of our attendees, Anthony, asked, when creating a product or service, how do we downplay our own biases? And I think everyone hit on this a little bit. So if we want to just go ahead and, Larry, if you want to kick it off, and then followed by Andrew and then Colin.
You know, that's one of the things that I tackle today. Being an artist, being a designer, you think you have the greatest product in the world. And sometimes you'd have to step outside, as your question is saying. And how do you realize it? Well, my wife, when I draw something or design something, I let my wife, a layperson, see it, and she would look at it and she would literally go, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with you? This is the greatest thing in the world. And then I would finally be able to step outside of me and go, God, now I see it. So one of the things I would say is ask people that are completely opposite of you, that are people from a different background, from a different perspective, that have no relationship with this product. Get their opinion, get their perspective. And that's literally one of the best things I would say.
Yeah, I agree, Larry, very much. And I think one of the elements that we see when we meet with our entrepreneurs is that it's real easy to get fixated with your solution. Entrepreneurs are usually driven by a specific problem that they've identified, that they've lived, right? And they want to have a solution for that, and they lock in on a solution. And that's where they want to march forward. And it's important to hold on to that. I think Colin mentioned, understanding your problem. They lock in on the problem. That's great. But the tools that we talked about, design thinking things, they're meant to help people see that there's other options. As Colin's presentation did a nice job kind of highlighting design thinking, the tools, iterating, testing your ideas. That's really important to be able to be open-minded, to see that there are some other ideas. And what we try to encourage people to remember is, as maybe at the end of it, your solution was the best solution. But if you don't look at some of the other ones, then you might invest a lot of money in something that wasn't the best solution. And you don't know until you go look for it. So I think that that's really important to help with. Then one of the other things that we encourage, I love what Colin had in there about keeping it gritty on research, and that's great. And for entrepreneurs, you don't have unlimited resources and funds. So that's going to be really important, go out and talking to people. But it is also, during that component of research, essential that you remove yourself from the equation. We'll conduct some research, some field research for our design team, where we're talking to the people and understanding their problems and things. But when it comes to sharing the ideas, we try to separate the inventor from the equation, and also ourselves as designers from the equation, because inherently we're going to be passionate about one of our concepts and things. So you need the brutal and honest truth sometimes. So it's important to get those concepts out there, put those in front of people, as all of our panelists have talked about, and let them be brutally honest and learn the things that you don't want to learn. Larry mentioned being uncomfortable. I think that's one of the things that makes people uncomfortable is hearing that maybe their idea wasn't something that people really want. But if you listen to them, you can discover how to refine that idea to make it better so it is, or spin off in a different direction to solve the fundamental problem that you originally had that you're trying to address.
Yeah, I think I agree with both Larry and Andrew, but I think for my answer, I'm going to go a slightly different direction here. And I think that I don't think we have to downplay our biases. I don't think that that's actually key to this process as much as having the self-awareness to understand where those are, where your own blind spots are, and where you need additional perspective around you in order to truly understand that and become an anthropologist in many, many ways, as much as you can be. Like, read a lot, a ton about things near and far, about people who are like you and not like you. You know, look to other industries and see like what's happening there. What are people doing there? How are people interpreting different things there? And because our biases are so ingrained and they're so part of who we are, that by trying to downplay them, I think you're actually just dulling your own brilliance in many ways. And so it's not about downplaying them. It's about recognizing what they are, where they are, and knowing what you need to do to round out your own weaknesses in that way.
Fantastic. Thank you all for sharing these really impactful insights. We have another question that kind of builds on this. It builds more on, we're talking about the ideation side and eliminating biases or being cognizant of them. But once we get past that stage and we have a product idea or we have some sort of service idea, Tiana asks, how does an entrepreneur or individual get connected? Especially if you have an innovative idea, what are some methods? What are some tools? Who do they need to connect with? And this is open to everyone.
Well, for me, when I first started getting into this space, literally, I would go to Walmart, Target, and I would find like products, and I copied everyone's emails. I contacted everyone's email, website. I contacted every customer service that I could find. I Googled anybody in the space, and it's cold call. I literally reached out to anybody and everybody. And like anything, you're gonna meet someone who's gonna probably say, hey, maybe I can't help you, but contact these people. And if I can't, if they don't know someone, I'll contact this one. But one of the best ways is do things like the SBA, like what we're doing right here. This is a wealth of knowledge, and you never know who knows who.
But there's a really strong culture around Indianapolis, I believe, a connected culture with different groups, whether it's if you need funding, there's groups that you can connect with that can support you in that. I think Larry's uniquely positioned here to understand what it takes if you have the idea and you want to get it sold. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, we have a lot of companies that come to us. And it's not an easy road for entrepreneurs. It seems like the ones that are most successful are like Larry, where you actually built the product, you invested in the tooling and you're selling it yourself rather than trying to license it. So building that network, for figuring out how to find those connections with people that you can sell it to, I think that's just all essential.
Totally agree. The only thing I'm going to add is you have to differentiate yourself in some capacity. What I mean by that is tons of people. One of my jobs at Delta Faucet is to review our submit an invention form from our parent or holding company website. You have to actually go a step further than you think you do. It's not enough to just have an idea and go to a business and say like, hello, I have an idea, or go to a venture firm and be like, hello, I have an idea. You're going to need to build something. You're probably going to need to invest additional time, energy, and resources into it, because on that form, if you don't have, I'll be honest, like a patent or like some really in-depth, detailed description of what it is, and I can even see a proof of concept, I'm not even going to pass that along internally. That's just going to get a downvote from me, and we're going to move on to the next thing, because there's dozens of submissions and there's not enough time. And I think that's the hardest part about like how do I get connected? How do I advance my idea? Is if all you have is an idea on a sticky note or on a napkin and a drawing, like that's not enough really anymore. I'm doing that daily with people internally. So you've got to beat the couple hundred of employees inside Delta who I'm working with on a daily basis. And you've got to outcompete these companies in some way, which means you have to differentiate yourself. You've got to come to it with a unique perspective. You have to have a clear definition of the problem that you need solving. And quite frankly, you might even want to start collecting some initial data around like potential revenue opportunities, market sizing, what does this look like in the market? Something to look into. There's a really interesting upcoming concept called proto selling, where instead of trying to actually sell an object, you make it look like you have the object and you try to sell it accordingly. There's some groups that are leading that right now, and you can really start to get it, like not just 100% of my friends and family that I talked to said they would buy this, but like actually I ran a series of Facebook ads, and of the 2% click rate on the ad, 80% of people actually committed to adding to cart. Like now you have some data to back up your findings, and you're going to have to start doing some of this before even really getting connected, because otherwise people are just going to kind of hand wave you away, unfortunately, regardless of how good your idea really even is.
I'm sorry, I was going to say Colin's exactly right. Companies want to know, do you have skin in the game? Because anyone can come up with an idea. Hey, I have a thingamajig, or whatchamacallit. Just for example, with me, one patent is well over $13,000. And now, similar to Andrew, I probably have about 27, my name's on about 27 patents. Now, about half of these are with companies, but a good third of these came out of my pocket. I would literally never tell my wife how much money I've spent on prototypes and patents and advertising in my websites. But as an entrepreneur, young entrepreneur, you need to show this potential OEM or this potential client or customer, dude, this is for real. This is worthy of it. It has merit. I wouldn't have invested so much blood, sweat, tears, and cash if it wasn't a real deal or worthy of being looked at.
Fantastic insights from each of you. I kind of want to build on this idea. You've kind of hit on this point of you got to have evidence, whether it's through a product or whether it's through data you've collected that there's potential customers are actually interested in your product. But what happens if you have a product that doesn't yet exist in the market, right? And you're entering a new category space where you need a lot more evidence to prove that this product is actually useful and meaningful. Could you kind of speak on that?
Well, I'm gonna take this, and forgive me for, you guys can shut me up. I'm kind of in my element now. I'm gonna steal this from Steve Jobs, who stole it from someone else. He said the best way to know the future is to create the future. That's what we as industrial designers do. If I'm creating something that already exists, so I'm changing the color or I'm changing it from a square to a slight round, what do you need me? Now, this also becomes it's a blessing in the sense that we can create the future, but at the same time, that becomes the challenge when you're trying to create something new to this audience that's unfamiliar with it. And people get caught up in their familiar. If you only knew about this rectangular box that you could put a cassette in and play 8 songs, you would think, wow, this is great, until someone shows you an iPod that you can play 800 songs. And this becomes the challenge in telling people it's okay to accept different, to look at things different. It's an uphill battle sometimes. Sometimes people get it, sometimes they don't. We didn't always have iPads, but we do now, so it's the journey. Andrew and Colin can both tell you plenty stories, I'm sure, but that's just my thing.
Yeah, I'm sure Colin's seen this with his research and things too. We see this when we do concept validation. People have a hard time embracing something very different. And I think sometimes, it's important for our customers to take a leap of faith. And you may just have to go for it. And some of it is your success may just be based on your passion to move it forward. I think that, Colin mentioned his counterpoint was that our bias is important. I think that's probably going to be a place where our bias does come in. Your passion for the solution and how important it is. Some of it's going to be the idea, and some of it's how much sweat you put into pushing that idea forward, I believe.
The only thing I'll add here, I like to call this reframing the competitive set. So like one of my favorite quotes of all time, it's attributed to Henry Ford. He used to say, like, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Like cars didn't exist, but horses did. So what was Henry Ford's competitive set? It wasn't nothing that didn't exist yet. He had to beat horses. So even if you have something that quote unquote doesn't exist, go back to that problem. What's the consumer problem or pain point or human emotion or whatever that you're trying to solve? What else is doing that? And how do you beat that? One of my favorite things, Netflix doesn't see Amazon Prime, doesn't see Disney Plus, doesn't see any of these groups as their competitors. They see sleep as their competitor. Netflix makes decisions about their application based on how can we keep people up and watching Netflix, right? Streaming services didn't really exist before Netflix, and Netflix continues to say, you know what, we're not competing with groups who are laggards or are following us. Like we've decided that we have a different competitive set. So even if you have something that doesn't exist, go back to the problem. What are you trying to solve? What impact are you trying to have on human beings? And figure out what else is doing that. And then figure out how are you going to compete against that, not compete against nothing. And I think that can really help you understand a direction to go from that point.
Thank you all so much. This is a natural segue to our next question, especially on your point, Colin, on Netflix and them being really consumer driven and focused on grabbing your attention. And one of the methods they used was they had a competition many years ago to drive predictions and predict what content would be watched the most. Colin, this is from Ashley, and she had this question for you. She mentioned that this idea of methods, and that's what Netflix did, and tools. She finds herself in this position all the time. What kind of methods are available to her? What tools can an entrepreneur use, especially if they're resource bound or resource limited? And anyone can jump into after Colin provides some insight.
Yeah, so for me, and this is me beating my dead horse at this point, but to a certain degree, you've got to figure out what exact problem you're trying to solve. So thinking about, let's be specific. You have an idea that you're trying to take to market, and maybe it's not working. Okay, why isn't it working? Is it not working because the idea isn't good? Is it not working because the process that you're following isn't going from point A to point B effectively or efficiently? Are there problems in the manufacturing process and the supply chain process? Is the group that you're working with not embracing the new direction that you're looking to go? All of these are different, like first tier why answers and responses there that can lead you down a different path. And there's so many different paths you can go, right? So I talked about like process mapping or like Lean Six Sigma. There's a place where if you're fairly certain the idea is okay, but the execution is failing, you may not need to go explore new ideas. Instead, you want to figure out every single point between when the problem's starting to when it needs to be completed, and map that out and figure out what's going wrong in any one of these given areas, right? So maybe it's your product struggling to get to market. You map it out and you find out that one of the reasons it's struggling to go to market is because there's a 12-day delay between it leaving Catalyst's warehouse and it getting to your store, right? Like that's a huge problem, but you don't need a new idea. You need to fix that it's taking 12 days for that to happen. And that's a different problem. Or you might find out that things are being slow and drag, and maybe you're not able to sell it because your story is not aligned. People in your organization haven't bought into this new change. Well, go read up on some change management and figure out how to effectively lead change within either your small organization, or how to effectively help others, maybe even external to your organization, navigate that change. To your point, Nick, Netflix is known, and lots of large kind of tech companies are known for doing these kind of like hackathon days. Can you free up people's space and time just to create new potential solutions and worlds? That's another thing that you can do. Do you need design thinking? Do you need assistance in that way to create new ideas and concepts? There's so many different tools, but the core, and what I want you to take away from my message, you have to understand exactly what your problem is, or you risk deploying the wrong tools and solutions to your problem. And not enough people spend enough time understanding the problem and doing like a true root cause analysis.
I think it's a tricky thing to understand how to do that too. Colin's going to be somebody who's particularly skilled at assessing that, right? There's a lot of tools out there. You could go online, you could read a lot of different publications on all these research tools. There's traditional research tools. I mentioned focus groups and things like that. But I think one of the really important things is being able to listen to the research that you're doing. If you have people hear what they want to hear, and these focus groups and different research events we take customers to, they'll log on to the thing they want to hear, and they won't hear the real message. And it takes some skill and some talent to do that. So I would encourage people to, you can learn that, you can engage on it. Colin's just mentioned a lot of different techniques, right? But you have to be trained probably at doing that, and also maybe you need some other ears to listen to make sure that you're not just hearing what you want to hear, but they'll counterpoint you and make sure that you hear what you need to hear.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. So I think underneath a lot of the stories that you've told and what you've been able to do with producing new products is this idea that there's a process, that entrepreneurship is a journey. It's not just an action, but a process involved. Talia has a really good question. How would you differentiate the process of building your idea when you're offering services rather than when you're offering a physical product? Any insights here will be really helpful.
My big thing here is, especially with services, is we have to understand what is making our service different and test that hypothesis in as real of a setting as possible. And so, like, just a small example. Say you're trying to build a new customer service model for your store. And what's different about the customer service model for your store is, I'm just making this up on the spot, your cashiers actually select the product for the consumer based on a survey that they take when they enter the door. Well, then what you should do is you should actually create that survey and pretend and bring it to people and ask them to pretend that they've come into your store to buy your product using this new customer service method. And you'll learn really quickly through putting people through that process exactly what's working, what's not working, how do they like it, what additional problems are you accidentally creating through trying to solve this other problem. And you want to almost create, I always call it like a skit, and you want to actually get consumers to experience it, because what people will tell you and what they will do are two different things. And so you want to put them in as close of a situation where they're doing that service or doing that process as you can. And you want to try and keep your experiment in this way to as few features as possible, right? So maybe the first time you're testing your survey, and let's say you confirm that that survey works really well and that people actually love not having to peruse the store and try to make a selection based on however they're feeling that day. And then you now want to test, like, how do you effectively kind of intercept that consumer? So now you create a new series of tests where now you're testing a new intercept method, and you want to slowly build features one at a time, because services are very complicated. And so it's hard to know what is working and not working if you throw it all together at once. So you want to do a series of small incremental tests to build that scaffolding over time and confirm one hypothesis at a time as much as possible. Sometimes that won't be necessarily possible, but you want to try and reduce the number of features to your service at any one given function, because otherwise you're going to have a really hard time, if it doesn't work, pulling that apart and figuring out what's not working from that service interaction.
Prototyping still, right, Colin? You're prototyping.
100%.
I showed sketches, or I showed those 3D prints. That's a prototyping, a physical thing, but you're prototyping the service is the same. We'll prototype here assembly processes, for customers. We have incubation assembly. It's the same idea. Let's build the thing. Let's experience the thing and see what's going to work and not work. And the faster you can do that, the faster you can learn, the better you'll be. Storyboarding is a tool that we'll use to think about that process. I showed you some sketches of a product concept, of a product, a thing, right? But you can storyboard that skit that Colin mentioned to start to see some initial hiccups before you actually employ everybody to get out there and do it. So it's a sketching technique that, it's just a tool the designers and design thinking might have, but it's for the same objective.
Wonderful, wonderful. Building on this idea of prototyping and A/B testing is kind of what you're referring to here. You can do it from a product base and from a service base. This is a general question because I think we're all hitting at design thinking here, but how does design thinking really impact innovation? How has it transformed your life and how you see your business or the companies that you work for?
So design thinking is an interesting one for me personally. When you go to school and you become an industrial designer, you learn all these things. Then the world says, "Hey, let's do design thinking," and you say, "Oh, well, what is that?" Well, gosh, that's what I was doing. It's fundamentally, and it's not a complicated thing. I love if Colin should show that diagram again. It's simple. You understand the problem. You think of a lot of solutions. You don't lock in on one. You think of a lot of solutions. You build prototypes, you test it, you learn, you do it again until you hone in on the best solution. And I think when people are open to that, it will help improve their results on their solutions.
Larry, I'm going to direct this next question to you. You mentioned this idea of spending a large amount of capital to get patents for your product idea. So one of the questions that we have here is, how do you get capital to actually design a product of yours?
Well, first of all, I'm in debt, so if you guys want to help me out, I do take handouts. We just talked about design thinking. A lot of this, we use the phrase, think outside the box. Literally, you have to think outside the box. As it pertains to prototypes, literally, if you saw how I started, I started out using basic toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls, and I would tape them and cut them and try to jerry rig and MacGyver and do things like that. Literally, I would go to the back of warehouses and I would get some of their old throwaway things, and I would use this throwaway material, no joke, to try and glue and work things together. I had to think outside the box and think about cost effectiveness. Then, now let's fast forward to when things got real. There are resources to help fund you. Like, for example, maybe 4 of my patents when I was in Colorado, Washington, and here. Like, for example, I would Google pro bono patents, and there are organizations or attorneys' offices that will do pro bono work. So literally about at least 4 of my patents were done through the pro bono organization. But ultimately, let's keep it short. You have to think outside the box. You have to think, okay, if I'm hungry, what am I going to do? Am I going to, get some cherries off someone's tree or whatever? You have to think things differently, whether it's, again, trying to MacGyver something with little remnants of garbage, the things that people have thrown away, knocking on different organizations like the SBA saying, how can you direct me to someone? I mean, even asking your family member, hey, can you donate $5, $10? And literally, these are things that I have had to do. That's pretty much it.
There's a lot of crowdsourcing out there that's become popular the last few years. People are using, different online tools to get some funding. Seems like the ones that we've seen more successful have invested a certain amount to get to a nice prototype. They'll come to us to get to that level. Find someone who can help them produce a really nice video for their online promotion, and then have a good understanding of what it's going to cost to take the product idea or concept further. If they don't have a understanding that it's going to be $100,000 to invest in some injection mold tooling for it, and it's actually $200,000, then they won't be successful, right? And they won't be able to deliver. So they need to invest a certain point to what they can handle, and then do their homework so they know that they're asking for the right amount of money.
Fantastic. I want to build on that a little bit more before we close off this session. I have a great idea, or at least I think I have a great idea, and I begin the validation process. How do I know when it's ready? Whether it's to go out into market, or how do I know when it's ready to put it in front of, say, you, Larry, Andrew, Colin? I have some evidence. Are there key indicators and metrics that I should, individuals should be looking at?
Well, some of the things that you said, like, for example, I know Colin and Andrew are extremely busy, but putting it before someone like us, letting us evaluate it from a professional perspective. But even prior to meeting with people like us, your peers, your potential audience, going to like flea markets, whether or not you're selling this at flea market or just getting opinions, that's literally going to be a big part of it. Asking people, which, first of all, do you know what this is, to see if it's intuitive? Secondly, after explaining what it is, would they want something like this? Would this help to improve their life? If someone, when they start getting the reaction of, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Oh, that's pretty good. These are things that start going, hey, maybe I have something. And secondly, when you start to sell it, if people are starting to buy this, again, start off small, friends, neighbors, flea markets. That's when you'll start to see, this may be worth investing a little bit more money into it. And literally, I went to, again, this is me, I went to like the home improvement stores, and I've showed my product to the managers, asking them, do you think customers would buy this? First of all, would you buy it? Secondly, do you think customers would buy it? And that's when you start to build up, I think I have something that's worthy of me really investing $50, $60, $100, $150,000, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm going to give a really short answer, and then I'm going to give a little bit more complicated answer. My really short answer is you'll never actually know for sure. Larry, you even brought it up in what you said. There is still anxiety about how successful is this going to be and making it. What you will never know. You can have all the data in the world and still be wrong, and that's just the reality of the world that we live in. However, my more complex and probably more helpful answer is I love thinking about things in terms of a minimum viable product, which I think we've all probably worked with and we've probably mentioned, but I'm going to get really specific with what I mean by that. If you're going to bring an idea to me, I want to understand how desirable is this product? What kind of consumer feedback and understanding do you have on this? What is a likability score? Do you have intent to purchase information? Do you have some qualitative feedback about that? Do you have reviews based on what you've sold? I think that's really huge. The second component to an MVP is business viability. Do you understand kind of how much this is going to cost in your path to profit? Do you know how this is going to generate revenue? Do you know how much you need to sell this for? Do you actually have a good grasp on what your cost is for this product? And then I need to understand feasibility. Can you actually build this in any kind of scaled way? And again, it doesn't have to be hundreds of thousands of units immediately, but like, if you're like, oh, I've got 15 of these, and we know that we're going to sell 15 of those in the next 2.5 hours, that is a problem. And so you need to help me understand, what is this going to look like? How are you going to create numerous of these? That's really what I need to understand if your idea has enough merit to really push further: desirability, feasibility, viability. And the last part I'll add about a minimum viable product is, what are the minimum number of features needed to make this thing successful? I think sometimes we get a little too obsessed with this kind of pie in the sky view of an idea, and I want to boil it down, and I want to understand, like, what's the one key feature or function that delivers the value? What's the 80-20, right? 80% of the value is delivered by 20% of the functionality. What is that 20% of the functionality that we need out of this product or service? And that's where I want you to start. And I just want us to be there, because if you have that level of understanding, you're going to look like you really know what you have. You're going to know what the value is. You're going to be able to explain how it's going to improve someone's life and experience. And you're going to be able to explain to a business how it's going to add value to their bottom line as well. So that's how I think of an idea as being good enough.
All right. Thank you so much. I want to encourage everyone and remind you all that there is a link to the session survey in the chat box. Please fill this out. It's really helpful in assisting us with planning future webinars like this one. Also, I have one more question before we close out. Group, interested participants, can they contact you with ideas or thoughts? Can they reach out to you somehow?
Me,
Absolutely.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let's say yes. Mine is safehomes@aol.com, and it's safe is HOLMES, safehomes@aol.com.
Yeah, Catalyst. So we're down on the southwest side by the old airport terminal, just inside the loop. People are welcome to stop by. We can get a tour. My email address probably will be on some of the connected resources here. a.mendenhall@catalystpdg.com. I'd love to talk about my experiences. Happy to help.
Yeah. And for me, I'll also send you my email, but feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just my name. And as far as I know, I'm the only Colin Byard who exists. So you'll find me pretty quickly.
All right. Thank you all. Everyone, let's give a warm virtual round of applause to our panelists today. This concludes our session for today. I would like to thank Andrew, Colin, and Larry for participating in this afternoon session. Please visit the Minority Business Series webpage at indianablackexpo.com. That's indianablackexpo.com for additional information and resources to help you with your business. Cheers, everyone. Have a